This is the Hydross fight in Serpent Shrine Cavern. To begin, the adds which spawn on the right are picked up by the tanks, and the tanks basically take them by themselves so they can build sufficient rage. You can throw the occasional fireball at them to build up charges on the Dark Moon card if you like. Notice this is a DPS AoE heavy fight, therefore I'm using both mana oil and mana food, have a Shadow Priest and a Blessing of Wisdom from the Pallies. I should also be running Mage armor, but I'm not. I'm running Molten armor, which will come back to haunt me in the end. Notice I'm also using a Flask of Supreme Power, not Pure Death, because you want the Arcane. For the arcane explosions. Once the tanks have enough rage, you're going to move into position. I usually help take down any of the remaining adds, because you don't want them running around, but once those are down, you will move into position and start your opening volley on Hydross, which is usually 3 to 5 scorches, depending on how many fire mages there are to apply the scorch debuff, and I usually add a fire blast at the end just to put one more charge on the Dark Moon card. Here I blink instead of casting fire blast because I'm a noob. Then your usual 3 fireball, 1 fire blast rotation using your cooldowns. They're Icy Veins and then a mana gem. Since I'm using the Serpent Coil Braid, you want to try and have your cooldowns running in parallel as much as you can. So if you can get them both running at the same time, that's great. This is the one sort of direct DPS portion of the fight, so you can just use your cooldowns and your highest DPS rotation, which is 3 fireballs to 1 fire blast. You'll burn through mana, but it's good. You want to stay spread out during this area, or that will happen. You'll get Water Tuned, which causes damage and freezes you, cutting into your DPS time. Once enough applications of the Frosty buff have happened, the tank will call to stop DPS, as just happened there, so it can be pulled across the center line to the second tank, and he becomes poison. He spawns those adds, and at the point you do nothing. You wait for the tanks, and the pally tank here helps to pick them all up, and once they say they've got them, then you can run in, start with a blast wave and then arcane explosion, over and over again, until the adds are down. You want this right on top of Hydross as well, so that the AoE affects him too. Once you're down to 1 add, then you can start backing away from him, cast Fire Blast at this time, so while you're moving, your cooldown is going, and then once you're in position, Scorch to get at least 1 debuff on him, and then just Fireball. You always want to back away from him so that you're on the appropriate side, so that when he is pulled across the center line next, once too many poison debuffs are put on the tank and he's moved to the other tank, you're standing on the correct side. In this case, it's the far side. The stop DPS call has just happened. I'm going to evoke because I'm out of mana. You always want to make sure that if he's crossing the center line, you stop the evoke, otherwise you may draw aggro. And it's just the same thing here. You wait for the tanks to say that they have picked up all the adds. Then you can run in and start with a blast wave and then arcane explosion. It will eat up huge amounts of mana, but it is your fastest DPS AoE, and getting the adds down quickly is very important. So you just AoE, staying right on top of them until you're down to maybe 1 add, and you start backing away, cast your Fire Blast, Scorch, and then Fireball. Again, during this phase you want to stay spread out because you can still be water tuned. People tend to forget that during these later phases, so you want to stay spread and then just keep on fireballing. You notice I'm using Quartz here, which allows you to start casting the spell as soon as you see the cast bar reach that red at the end, which represents your latency, which allows you to truly chain cast spells. It's roughly equivalent, that 1 add-on, of adding between 50 and 100 extra haste. The call for DPS to stop has just occurred. They're pulling him across the center line. He becomes poison. The tanks pick up the adds. Or in that case, one of them doesn't, so he has to come back, and you just stand there. You use this time to get out of that 5-second area on Spirit and regen a little bit of mana, and then as soon as they say yes, you can go in. You can run in Blast Wave, Arcane Explosion, and just repeat that until you see them down to maybe 1 add. In this case, Hydross has moved away, so you want to reposition yourself so your AoE is hitting both of them. And once the ad goes down, cast your Fire Blast, back up into position, toss a Scorch, and Fireball. It's a mana-intensive fight, so you're going to want to use a mana pot as soon as it's up, and a mana gem as soon as it's up. If you're using the Serpent Coil Braid, you might sometimes hold off using a mana gem, so that you can use it at the best time, that is, right before you're about to start DPSing hard. You don't want to use it, for example, at this point when the stop DPS has just been called and you're just waiting it out for him to be pulled across the line. But you, by and large, you want to be using both of those things as soon as they're up, because if you're not, you're going to run out of mana potentially. Again, you wait for them to say, yes, it's okay to run in, and then you run in, Blast Wave, and Arcane Explosion. In this case, I had just used a mana gem to get the Serpent Coil Braid bonus right before I ran in. That way, that bonus is applied to all of the AoE and causes a little bit more damage. Back up, spreading out to avoid that watery tomb, and then just Fireball. It's around 20%. In other fights, you might want to use a Fire Bloom, Flame Cap, or a Destruction Pot at 20%. In this case, you can see I'm having some mana issues, so I don't. Had I used Mage Armor, that might have been mitigated. But all that, those Arcane Explosions do burn through a lot of mana. The problem is that every moment you're standing, not casting because you're out of mana, all that wonderful haste gear that you've gotten isn't doing you any good. So you see there someone was casting during the transition, and so Hydross went after him instead of the tank. That's why it's so very important when they call for DPS to stop, you stop, back up, and then you wait, doing nothing until they say yes, you can begin AoE, run in Fire Blast, Arcane Explosion. And as soon as you're down to 1, or at 1 is dead, you can start backing up with Fire Blast. And you see I'm out of mana, so I'm just going to be casting Love Scorches while I desperately wait for my mana gem to come up. Both mana gem and mana pot sadly are on cooldown at this moment, and he's going to go down before those come up. But that is the Hydross fight in short, as done by the Stargazer clan of Elune.